In this week's episode of the Data Radio Show, I'm going to be catching up with James Hartwright, the Managing Director of Pragmaticians. We're going to be taking a look to see how you can make a sales pitch towards executives who don't necessarily know how data works for them, as well as the latest and greatest news from around the internet. Let's do that now on the Data Radio Show. Hey, welcome to the 13th episode of the Data Radio Show. And I've got a fun one for you today because I get a chance to sit down and talk movies with somebody who is a massive movie fan like myself, James Hartwright, who is the Managing Director of Pragmaticians, as well as a number of other things. Like, this dude is busy. On top of that, we're going to take a look at a bit of a clip so you can get a bit of help when it comes to trying to do a sales pitch about upgrading data or the importance of data sets and information when dealing with high-level execs who might not necessarily know what it is that they can get out of really good quality data. And of course, on top of that, we've got all of the news that's fit to tell you about, including something to do with llamas, which is everywhere on the internet at the moment. So I guess the next best thing to do is jump in over to the news. This week marked the release of an updated open source LLM from Meta. The Llama 3 model is causing quite a stir, not so much for its speed and performance improvements, but because it's accessing real-time Google and Bing knowledge sets, meaning that it's leveraging the most up-to-date information available. With an 8 billion parameter model and 70 billion, the benchmark scores are comparable to other similar-sized models available currently. What is worth noting is that shortly, Meta plan to release a 400 billion parameter model that promises to be blazingly fast and capable as multimodal model for text, images, audio, and video. Once again, the pace of development seems to be going at light speed as the model's processing power and capabilities all continue to evolve exponentially. In regulatory news, JD Super reported on how in the last quarter state and federal governments in the United States are actively regulating the development and deployment of artificial intelligence. California, Connecticut, Colorado, Utah, and the federal government have proposed or enacted legislation related to AI with a focus on transparency, algorithmic discrimination, and governance. It also reported on how the EU AI Act crossed the finish line and will enter into force 20 days after official publication, which will likely occur during the second or third quarter of 2024. 6 months later, the prohibitions on unacceptable risk AI kick in, followed by the main obligations 18 months after that. The key requirements center on high-risk AI systems and general-purpose AI systems. High-risk AI systems include those used for job recruiting, monitoring, or evaluating performance and behavior in the workplace, determining credit worthiness or establishing a credit score, and pricing life or health insurance, among other things. General-purpose AI systems are those that are capable of performing a wide range of distinct tasks and are trained with a large amount of data using self-supervision at scale. Much like GDPR, this act will impact organizations that deal with the EU-based companies, as well as within the EU itself. So understanding its implications is likely to apply to most chief data and AI officers around the world. In data engineering news, last week Databricks released DBRX, an open-source language model surpassing GPT 3.5 in performance, with strengths in programming and mathematics that are comparable to leading models in retrieval augmented generation tasks, or RAG. While DBRX is a general-purpose LLM, it does have a USP. It pushes the boundaries of open LLMs, providing enterprises with the means to develop their models with robust capabilities previously only available through closed models. DBRX uses a mixture of experts, MOE architecture, meaning that a range of neural networks are utilized for more efficient task management, and 12 trillion tokens of text and code data were leveraged during the model training phase. It's available through Hugging Face and Databricks Marketplace, showcasing the power of Databricks technology. There's actually a link in the description down below so you can go and check this one out for yourself. And that's it for the news this week. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, have your say as a community member, and don't forget, if you're not already a member of the Data Vault Innovators community, you can follow the link that's in the description below and go and join the conversation over there completely for free. Now, this month's news was actually brought to you by Wearscape. Wescape helps IT organizations leverage automation to design, develop, deploy, and operate data infrastructure faster. More than 1,200 customers worldwide rely on Wescape automation to eliminate hand coding and other repetitive, time-intensive tasks to deliver data warehouses, vaults, lakes, and marts in days or weeks rather than months or years. Wescape is a global operations set out in the USA, UK, Singapore, and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and can be found online at wescape.com. Right. Next up, we're going to have a little chat with an old friend of mine, James Hartwright, who is, well, he's pretty much the smartest person I know when it comes to things like data security. So I'm really keen to have a catch up with him, learn a little bit more about what it is that makes him tick, and get into the nitty gritty about some of the things he really enjoys, especially since we're so close to Star Wars Day. That's next week in case you are somebody who celebrates such an event. So let's go and meet James. Thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate it, James. First question, how are you?
Good. Very busy. Currently working across like 4 different roles, all connected with data.
Oh my God. How do you find time to relax?
Uh, that's I do. I watch a lot of films. It's my dad's issue is he introduced me for films from the about the age of 8, and I will watch pretty much anything.
That's not a bad thing, though. I mean, there's some terrible films out there, but generally speaking, there's something decent you can find in most of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you get to a position where you are juggling so many roles around data? How did you actually get into the field?
It's interesting. So I actually started as a trainee programmer, putting PCs together for end users, and then got a bit into programming through that, and became a DBA fairly quickly. But my DBA role was I'm just looking after databases and tables and making sure that they're running. What really got me into data was I started at GE Finance in the UK, which you may be able to tell by my accent. And I got into marketing side. I got into how people are looking at what people are buying and why, and putting analytical models to go, here's the next best thing you might like to buy. And I got really interested in that. And that was just sort of the genesis of my, hey, this data thing's pretty cool. And the sort of things I can do with it and find insights and help people like data scientists reformat, adjust the data so that it makes their job easier. And yeah, I've just gone on there. I'm a problem solver by nature. So applying that to business problems with data-driven, data-backed, this is why I can do 4 different jobs, because I'm always interested and excited in solving problems.
So, what advice then would you give yourself 25 years ago from what you know today?
Um, uh, I think
Other than
it's
invest in Apple.
yeah. Well, I should have taken that job that was giving me £3,000 a week in the late 1980s. But I think, look, in line with that is I didn't really trust my competency, um, and it's like, yeah, just go. If you see something that looks interesting, just go for it, because that thing of curiosity, enthusiasm, etc., has got me a long way in my journey, taking me around the world. So yeah, just go
So
for it.
that's brilliant advice. I don't hear that often enough from people. It's usually things like, study this, or, listen to the people who tell you to do this. I think actually digging in and going for it and having fun with something is a
Yeah,
really good piece of
totally.
advice.
Yeah.
Um, for people who are starting out in the field today, is there anything that you'd tell them? Same sort of advice, something different?
Yeah, look, I discovered it was probably a bit too should have been earlier, but that thing of understand what it is that people want to do with this data that you're playing with, because as soon as you start understanding the various personalities, profiles, it really does change the way that you start thinking about what you're going to do with that data, and it will get you thinking about data quality and data governance and robustness of process. That thing of somebody coming in at 9 o'clock in the morning, the first thing that they'll ask is, has the data been updated for that day? And, can I trust it when I go and look at it? So anything and everything that you can do to reinforce that trust, or tell them when it's not quite good, is actually again a really good way to sort of set yourself in, because people will always, straight away, if they see a result that they don't like, it must be the data warehouse, must be the data team to screw that up. So
Mm.
do everything you
It,
can to go, no, not us.
no, no, definitely. I know the feeling really well. It's just trying to find a scapegoat
Yes.
and trying to make sure
Yep.
you're not that goat
Yeah.
and get out of it as best you can.
Indeed.
You mentioned movies as a way to relax. Do you have a favorite?
Oh, that's
I
like
know this
favorite
is.
child.
I was going to say,
Look
yeah.
at
I know for movie lovers, this is a horrible question.
I know. Like the one that, so there's definitely a Quentin Tarantino thing in there. Probably the
Hmm.
film that most affected me was Reservoir Dogs. Went to see it at the movies and just went, oh my god, I don't really know what happens there. But the one I go back to lots is Pulp Fiction. There's just
Hmm.
such a beautiful set of players and pieces, and his real conversational thing off the page. It's just brilliant.
I love how that film plays with time because
Yeah,
we get so used to films telling stories in linear time, and that's just one that blew everybody's socks off with
yeah, yeah,
how
yeah.
it did that. And
And they're
I had a
interconnected
chance.
stories as well. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, it's beautiful. I had a chance to meet him about 5 or 6 years ago. He came over here for a premiere of something, and so it was all red carpet and star studded and stuff like that. And he was surprisingly quiet. Like I kind of expected somebody who had this big personality, and no, he came in and he did a few sort of very quick, quiet hellos, and went and hid in the corner and had a drink with people he knew, and yeah, it was flies
yeah.
halfway around the world for a world premiere and
And
doesn't talk
sit
to
in the
many
corner.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was very very strange, but yeah, to meet Tarantino, like it's one of those like right up there kind of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah,
Do
totally.
you have any other filmmakers that you're a big fan of?
Uh oh. I mean, look, I'm an old sci-fi book fan,
Hmm.
so everything that came through under June, and Villeneuve has just blown me away in terms of words on the page and writing the screenplay or co-writing the screenplays and his ideas of taking the thing moving forward. So yeah, that's the recent. You've really done something with something I thought wouldn't be filmable.
I'm very curious to see what they do on the third book because it's nowhere near as action packed
Yeah, very
as the
out there.
first. Yeah, it's very different. So I'm very curious to see where they go next. But they've
Yeah, yeah.
obviously set up the story to be a little bit different to the books
Mm,
with
yeah,
the end of the movie.
yeah, they have
Not
to.
to give anything away to anyone who hasn't seen it yet.
No.
In terms of sci-fi, then Dune's right up there. What else have you got on the list? What's a must watch?
Um, well, a sort of a little move back into the data and analytics. Both Her
Hmm.
and Ex Machina would be two things I would recommend somebody seeing if they're wanting to see, our generative AI future. And that you look at Her made 4 or 5 years ago, and now what we're seeing with Gen AI and going, it's not that much of a stretch. We have people who are interacting with artificial humans in a very empathetic way, and almost going, well, I don't need to go and see my therapist anymore because my Scarlett Johansson is doing everything for me. I may have given away the plot there, but
But it's quite fascinating though when you look back at a film, even that far. Like it's not an old film. Just how on the nail they got a lot of the aspects of Gen AI. It's kind of scary. Whereas you look at something like Rogue One from the Star Wars franchise, and that's a modern film, and they're still using data on tapes that you have to physically manually
yeah,
pull it. And I'm just like,
yeah,
that, yeah, data management in films is very inconsistent.
indeed, yes, yeah, yeah, and all of those things. Or look, pretty much anybody who works in IT and looks at hackers and just going, yeah, there's just no way, and I
No.
can see that. That's a bit of Linux that you've just written there. Can't
Hmm.
do what you suggested it might do. Yeah.
My one was always Jurassic Park, Well, there's the scene where they're in there trying to reboot everything, and the girl's like, "Oh, I know this system." It's like that's not how this
Yeah, I'm
works.
sorry,
It's
no.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
like beautiful shot of the Velociraptor turning, and you've got the code on and everything like that. But yeah, I'm just thinking, no, no, that's not how this works. It's yeah, it takes me out of it every time. Do you find that with books as well? Are you a bit of a reader or prefer film?
No, I look up. There's books there. There's a whole set of books next door. Yeah, I used to be a voracious reader of lots of sci-fi, but also some of the classics. That's definitely with all my work. That's definitely reduced. And I'm finding I'm reading a few more. Maybe it's my age. A few more biographies and a few more,
Mhm.
real life, real events. Than I was, the escapism that I used to do. But yeah, there's also a few technical manuals that I read on Sunday afternoons. So lots in around data governance, lots in around AI and how that might go, and the ethical parts of AI and etc. Um, that I still get some pleasure from reading. Some of them are a bit of a grudge. You have to take a break, go get a cup of tea. But in the main, yeah, it's another one of those of just um, finding that area of curiosity and just going in and going and not trying to become the polyglot, but just going.
Mhm.
There's a bit here. I need to know enough about this to sort of help fill the picture so that I can go sensibly. Uh, be one page ahead of the client next week, or just as I say, to go. I'm pretty sure I know how that works, and it fits in this in my mind, so that you can apply it appropriately.
Actually, considering how fast things are moving with AI at the moment, and it's everywhere, like it's all through the news and stuff like that, are you finding that your clients are much more up to speed with things like data management and how that feeds into Gen AI and what the
Um,
possibilities of it are?
it's very definitely top of mind.
Mhm.
There's and it look for a business. It's that nasty position of I know that if I start taking confidential documents and passing them into a generative AI, that there's massive risk there. But
Mhm.
taking that in line with, I also know that there's potential for massive reward, not necessarily in throwing confidential information, but saying, can you just tell me a little bit about this to help me fill my thing? Or can you create me a presentation that includes these bits and pieces? So yeah, most of the organizations are letting it release gently and slowly. And the majority, so I work a lot in the utilities space and a little bit in government. So most of them are going, let's try it internally. Let's try and help
Mhm.
augment our internal humans, making search better, making creating things easier before releasing the future Gen AI chatbot out to the general public. And like the Air Canada issue of it basically refunded something that it shouldn't. It went all the way up to court, and the court went, I'm sorry, your chatbot is part of your organization. It can't be treated as a separate legal entity. And it's like those sorts of things are, as I say, they're in the utilities, in the government space, in many organizations. That's just a bit too far because I haven't got the controls. The hallucination is still quite true, but we'll get there. Look, there's so many things coming around in ethical AI, responsible AI, and the controls and the rags on top of your base LLM to help it feed and drive. We're going to get better.
Do you find governments moving slower on this than private industry?
Uh, so I work quite a lot with in tourism, government tourism, and what I've seen there is those things like just making those starter pieces in website search nicer, easier. But yeah, the just because of the risk of running things internally, that your security,
Yeah.
transparency, etc. It's like, nah, there's just too much risk there. Even if you've got a human going and looking at it and going, that feels right, and double check, there's just a little bit too much risk at the moment.
With generative AI, bringing this back to authors, um, Asimov gave us 3 rules of robotics.
He did.
Is that something that comes up for people when they're looking into what's possible, what they can do,
So
or even the people
yeah,
that know that are designing it?
I so I used it probably about 5 years ago, when not pre-generative AI, but when we were actually going, no, there's some intelligent search type stuff going on there. I haven't used it recently. Um, the but Back to movies, I watched Finch last
Oh, yes.
weekend, and one of the first things he did was, when he got the robot talking, was, well, what are your directives? And the first one was Asimov's first rule. So look, I do believe that there's a lot in there, but as soon as you start saying a robot through action or inaction can't cause any harm to a human, it's like suddenly the Skynet and
Mm-hmm.
super intelligence type things start coming out. So yeah, I haven't used it recently because it's getting a little too close to the bone for a number of people about what might come very soon.
That's a kind of a horrifying thought. I
Yeah,
don't want to live in a world like that if I can help
no,
it.
yeah.
What about things like sports? Sports watcher, sports player, any sort of physical
Um,
activity?
yeah, there's part of my so I actually grew up, my right leg was in plaster probably for the first 8 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so therefore I never really got into team sports. There was a lot of brain, a lot of brain
Yep.
use. And then when I did get into sports, it was more, it was like, it's a self thing, or it's a one-to-one. I did a lot of squash, fair bit of badminton, but team sports, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I never got into it. And I've moved around so much, finding a team, in football, soccer, AFL, etc. I just never managed to settle on a single team. So, no, I'm not a sports guy, really.
No, fair enough. That makes perfect sense. I actually did a DNA test that I got the results back on this week. And one of the things that came in was that I'd be really good at sprinting and dancing as
Ah,
physical activities. I
okay.
can't dance. It was the historic DNA background was very European, and
Yeah.
which doesn't surprise me. But I'm not built for dancing. I'm certainly not built for sprinting. And I'm just sitting there going, how are these genetic traits like that? That seems like a very strange thing. And I suspect sports might be something along those lines as well. Some people
Mm,
are more attuned to it like that. They just seem
yeah.
to, it's
Yeah.
in their DNA somewhere.
Yeah. I
But
don't, my stamina, I've found, is actually really high. I come from a big farming background.
yeah.
So I think something in there, in just like, once I get going after the coffee, it's hard to stop me. But yeah, those, how genetics play out back into our modern world is, yeah,
Mm.
another really interesting thing.
See, the coffee thing was also on the list, and it said apparently I'm not a coffee drinker, and I can't go to work until I've had 2 in the morning. Like it's something not quite right there.
No,
I
no.
think that
Oh,
they must
look,
have
there's a bit of habit in there as well as
oh,
a requirement. Yeah.
yep, absolutely. Hey, do
But
you
it's,
have
look, it's still back to data.
yeah,
That you can take that DNA test. It can give you some guidance. And one of the things I'm really interested in there is the diet orientation.
mhm,
And if you are trying to lose weight, still certainly am after COVID, that
mhm,
here are the exercises that are going to be best for you. Here are the drugs, vitamins, etc., that are going to be best for you on DNA. And that's back to data. It's like, we've taken these, we've mapped it to good outcomes. There's just like a completely untapped, valuable area for the whole of humanity to start doing some of those things.
yeah, it came back with a whole bunch of information on things like blood oxygen levels, vitamin levels, stuff like that, that make a lot of sense if you wanna build up a profile for getting fitter and healthier and
Yeah,
living a better life, and I think
living longer. Yeah,
that's really useful.
yeah,
Living longer would be nice until the point that the robots take over. That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
goal at the moment.
But then you're going to be in the
Hey,
lap of luxury. They're just going to look after everyone's in need.
I don't know. I was always promised, once we get things like AI and robots, then humans wouldn't have to work. But instead, they're the ones doing all the creative writing and the artwork stuff, and we're the ones still working. And it feels
Yeah,
like
yeah.
something's not quite right
Something's
there.
gone wrong there.
It,
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah. Do you have any pet peeves when it comes to the way that people deal with data?
Um, oh, there's one that I caught pie charts. Like pie
Hmm.
charts are just horrible because they they don't give you anything apart from this looks like a pizza. The that 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 and I did a post a few months ago on LinkedIn and the anomalies. So people's misunderstanding around anomalies of saying, and I tend to do it with things like date of birth. So you've got a million people who've given you, hopefully, their date of birth, and you get
Hmm.
this bell curve
Hmm.
of age off the date of birth. But then you get something that says, "All right, I've got a load of people that are 124 years old." And it's like, well, how's that happened? And it's okay, when we loaded up this database and we said date of birth was mandatory and we had a load of old data, we had to populate date of birth with something on the ones where we
Hmm.
didn't have. So we picked the 1st of January 1900. So we've now got a whole pool of people who are 123, 124, 125 years old. And put putting that on some sort of visualization and going and saying, oh, can you exclude all of those records? Well, no, we can't, because if we exclude them all, you're excluding all of the behavioral stuff that's going on in
Hmm.
those unknowns. But just to know that there are anomalies there, that back to that data quality, not all of our data is ever going to be perfect. And you just start to need to learn to understand that they're there, that you sort of need to not look at them in this instance and look at them in others. So this thing of I can only have 100% perfect data in my database is awful, because in doing that, you're losing all sorts of interesting things that if you can just squint a bit, you can still get some great insights and some actionable stuff.
Do you find that there's sort of groups of people that are less likely to understand that are more like, look, I need this for, make a sales pitch to the company kind of thing, or, sell it to the executives, and this blip doesn't look right.
No, yeah, no, I think I haven't seen anybody that I can remember who's completely dissed. So
Hmm.
but it's a bit of education. That, and I've seen it coming up through, and for better or worse. So people who've gone through university, computer science or data, and they tend to get presented with almost perfect data.
Hmm.
Yeah. If you're going into the research arm, then not so much. But people who are going through these things, this is presented as perfect data, and they walk in their first or second or third job to an imperfect world. That we have a system that was created in the 1960s and we're still running, and then we hoiked it together with something that we bought last year, and there's going to be imperfections and anomalies and etc. there. And so, just getting them to understand that we can never get to perfection. Um, and we shouldn't ever try to get to perfection, but learning to live with it, and a bit of critical thinking in there is like, if I do or don't use this data, if I include or exclude it, is that how dramatically might that change or affect the decision I'm going to make? And if you can work with that and apply that bit of critical thinking and going, no, I can work with that, then we're going to be a lot better off.
And
And most people do come around to that.
so speaking of old data and new technology, I don't know if you saw the news today. They got Voyager 1 working again this
Oh,
morning.
yeah, great, fab.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I saw that, and I just like, this is brilliant. Like, it's a
yeah,
nice piece of good news about technology coming together and working.
yes,
Apparently, they it's 70 megabytes of space on there.
I
Like, it's
know.
nothing.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. But yeah,
yeah,
old technology, new technology working together.
yeah. And they just, I think what they did was they did effectively a reboot, but then said use this other chip, um,
Yeah.
for this thing, and you're just going like that thing of, well, not just that data piece, but that there is somebody there who had the documentation, the wonderful documentation
Hmm.
about how that was put together and could refer to it and reapply that. I mean, that's problem solving. That's
Oh
for
yeah.
me, apart from the human factor, that's way better than Apollo 13.
Yeah.
and what
Well,
they did to solve that problem.
realistically, it was launched in the mid 70s. So we're talking
Yeah,
50 years ago.
indeed.
So
Yeah,
the people who would have been working on it at the time are probably no longer working on that project.
indeed.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
just having that data to be able to reset something like that,
Mm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
literally outside of the solar system. I think that's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, that's us done. Right, that's the whole interview. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for
Wonderful.
joining me, James. Where can people
No,
find
pleasure.
you?
Yes. Sorry.
Where can people find you?
Oh, yeah. So go on to LinkedIn. If you go on to LinkedIn, Mr. Data, MisterData, you will find me. Otherwise, I've recently started up a data consulting, data strategy, data insights company called Pragmaticians. So if you go on to www.pragmaticians, so that's pragmatic IANS.com, and you'll find us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
Hey, I want to thank James again for sitting down and having a chat. I love chatting with him because he is so into movies, much like myself. And so it's really cool to have somebody where we share quite a bit of that in common. It's always fun to have chats with him about this kind of stuff. One of the things I found really fascinating in that chat was about making sure you've got the right data sets to be able to make the right decisions and to plan things going forward. It brought up a really interesting piece of content for me that we did in 2022 that was looking at how you deal with high level executives who might not necessarily understand the importance of data because their priorities are focusing on something else. And occasionally you need to find a way to make sure that they understand the importance of the work that you're doing and the information that you need for it. So here's a clip from our masterclass from November 2022 where that's the question that we posed for them. How do you tackle giving information to high level execs to help them make the best decisions?
Yeah, I've got one good example I want to talk about with this one. So we had an organisation that shipped pallets of stuff around the country, and they got their entire business case for getting a data quality framework in place so they could just identify and monitor and manage data quality. They got the business case in on one rule, and that rule was the size of the carton per pallet. Because if that was wrong, then the number of products per pallet were wrong, and then obviously cost, profit, everything is driven on how much stuff they can put on a pallet and ship. And so that one rule, that one data quality rule, and improving the accuracy of that justified this spend on putting in a framework that they could then apply data quality rules across a whole range of other things. They had mobile outlets, and when we looked at the GPS locations of some of their mobile outlets, they were sitting in the ocean. Clearly they weren't in the ocean, but so so lots of other benefits. But it's really about finding that there's usually one big impact rule. Like data quality management, quite often, not always, but quite often, will be a small number of rules that have a very large impact on the business, and it's that 80-20 rule. And so finding a high impact thing will get you on the path, and then you're already enabling people. You're getting a process in, you're getting some technology in maybe, and then you can apply that process to other data sets and other rules.
I think to add on to that, wherever you can, link it back to the executive or board bonuses. If you're going to have a major breach, the board's going to suffer. If the share price is going to fall, then the executive's going to suffer. So, it sounds like I'm being funny, but ultimately, that's kind of where decisions are being made. If it's going to affect someone personally, if they're in their back pocket or their reputation, brand, etc. If you can link it back to those organizational stated goals that this is what we're bonusing our executives on, then that's how you're going to get attention, particularly for those big strategic plays that you want to make that require board level sign off. Then you've got to make it relevant to the board. Because again, getting it down to, this rule could mean this, and they're not listening to that. They read bullet points in a board report. So wherever possible, you want to make it very personal to the people who are running the organizations.
Yeah. Again, that same report I saw, around 70% of executives. So given an average company of around 250 employees, there's about $7.5 million lost through poor data quality. So you can throw that stat out there, but then we'll come back to the bit that Jules said earlier. When you're setting up a data quality rule, go, what is the cost to fix this that we could avoid if we'd have captured it, fixed it at source? The second one, which actually becomes really more important, and we talked about that on the install date, is what is the downstream negative impact of not having this data correct? And that usually is like 5 times that cost. But you add those two costs together and you sum them up in the number of errors we're creating per day, and you suddenly get here is your priority action list. Go and fix this one, because it will save you $1 million per annum on that first one. The next one, it's only $500,000 it will save you per annum. Yeah. So just work through that, and that very quickly, when you put numbers in front of people, and yes, Richard, associated to their KPIs, they will sit up and watch.
Right, that's us done and dusted for the week. Thank you very much for joining me for episode 13 of the Data Radio Show. I want to thank James again for joining me. It's always a great pleasure to sit down and have a chat to him, and as a fellow cinephile, it's always brilliant to sit down and talk movies with him. So I really enjoyed this week's conversation. It was brilliant. Don't forget, you can like, share, and subscribe to this particular video and our channel and tell everybody about it, or you could go and jump onto the Data Vault Innovators community, which is linked on screen at the moment, completely for free, to go and have chats about data management and the world of data. Next week is Star Wars week, May the 4th. So we're going to see if we can do something a little bit different for that week, but I've got to keep it under wraps until then because, spoilers. Until then, I guess the only thing that's left to say is, may the Force be with you.